Well, hello, Internet, and everyone else. Maybe you're not watching this on the Internet, but you're probably watching this on the Internet. I'm Mark Bagley. I'm the Vice President of Products and Offerings at DeepSeas, and I'm joined by four what I would, I'd usually use like a light swear word describing their level of ability. But since this is family friendly, I won't. I'm joined by Jeremy Schoenman, who is our offensive security leader here at DeepSeas. I'm joined also by Aaron Bierlin, who leads our threat intelligence operations here, as well as Martin Brow, who is one of our principal consultants on building cyber fusion centers for our customers. Gentlemen, thank you so much for being here.
Absolutely.
Happy to be here.
Happy to be here.
Right on. Well, I promised everyone that this would be all killer, no filler. So let's jump into it. We're here to talk about Mythos and the conversation, because I think all of us, when we started talking about this as a concept, were really frustrated that folks were either going straight to doom and gloom or it was a non-event. And as we discuss the concept of this and sort of why we're here, I think I need a one sentence version from each of you about what actually happened. And this is sort of before we go into, which is like okay, what do red teamers and blue teamers need to be doing differently? Just let's ground people in that. And Aaron, you're up, sir.
I would say that what we saw from this LLM model wasn't anything novel, wasn't anything new. All this is doing the exact same tactics that we've seen time and time again at machine speed, which is really what we're seeing from AI. It is the exact same threat at a machine speed that just needs to be met with defense at machine speed.
Right on. Jeremy, why don't you keep it rolling?
I can second it what Aaron said, but also kind of understanding that it took the place of several testers at once, right? Being able to test multiple things within machine speed, and understanding a lot of vulnerabilities in a little bit of time.
Martin,
Yep.
what's up?
So single line word sentence for this. I think if I were to sum it up, someone came up with a really great way to automate complex pen tests, correlate events, and give you all that information in a very fast manner. Is it new? No. Is it faster? Yes.
Got it. So when you think about, for example, like the FreeBSD TCP sequencing issue that it found like latent for 17 years, I mean, does that really sort of fit with, the way that you guys are thinking about it? Or is the fact that we can now cover so much more of a given thing's, code base, examining them for vulnerabilities, does that sort of flip the model on its head for y'all?
I wouldn't say it flips a model on its head. It's just more that, I mean, because it's AI, when a threat actor is going out and they're trying to figure out a way to penetrate into a system, number one, they're going to lean on what we call their tactics, techniques, and procedures, TTPs. With an AI model, it was trying to find the path of least resistance in a basically TTP that's infinite. So the reason why this sat latent for 17 years wasn't because necessarily it just wasn't the easiest way for any threat actor that wanted to, compromise a system. They didn't view that as a viable pathway for probably a number of reasons. Either one, lack of knowledge, or two, maybe it's just not the best, fastest, and quietest way to trip a vulnerability or chain a vulnerability to get into a system. But the AI can just look at 1,000 of them at one time, much like what Jeremy was saying earlier, is, you have multiple testers and the goal was get here or do this, and an AI just ran it. There's not very many times that anyone, even at a nation state level, can sit in a room and they go, just find everything that's vulnerable on this system and go now.
Yeah.
Like nation states don't do that. They don't have the funding or resourcing, but an AI model can. So it does open a lot of doors for what could be a threat, what is a vulnerability that can now be exploited. But that sat for 17 years because for some reason, to at least a human analyst, it was not convenient to even look into that way, like take that pathway to get onto a system. So that's a secondary reason of maybe it's very critical by everything that we see, but for some reason, threat actors didn't care about it before. And that's another question we have to ask is why didn't they care before? Why didn't anyone ever find this to begin with? But an AI did. That's going to help us understand how this model did what it did.
And take another step into that, Mythos, it was taking a look at the code, right? They had basically had a white box testing, whereas a penetration tester or anybody doing manual testing is primarily looking from a black or gray box perspective. So they're doing a deeper dive into the code of the system, which we may not see as testers.
Yep, I agree.
Totally understood. Right on. So let's sort of dive a bit more towards the concepts of what's going to be beneficial for both offensive security professionals as well as defensive security professionals when we have a model of this capability in our hands. I mean, Jeremy, I'll start with you. Like, you run our operations in this regard. What benefits are you actually expecting to derive from capabilities like Mythos?
Well, I know it's been stated several times, right? We'll have information overload in the fact that we can go through and identify tons and tons of vulnerabilities, right? In a small amount of time. It would then allow our testers to take that extra time to chain those vulnerabilities together and drive the business impact, right? Understanding that if this vulnerability can lead to a different path of attack that we haven't taken before is going to drive more value.
Got it. Got it. So, Martin, given that, your expertise is largely related to helping people build defensive programs, I mean, you know, definitely new ways of chaining things together, to Jeremy's point,
Yep.
can additionally develop business impact. But also now you're stuck in this situation where the the impulse to patch everything is now no longer viable because guess what? You're not going to be getting that volume of response because you've got 1,000 different red agents doing a thing.
Yeah.
How do you think about like what the defensive response ought to be?
I think that from a blue team perspective, when we're looking at, um, you know, let's say we're in the middle of a purple team, so we're looking at what the red team's doing. We have the blue team sitting here, and historically, we could see, we have a learning set up, we have things set up, we're monitoring EDR, we've got the SOC doing what they're supposed to be doing, and we can see different things and different tactics and techniques that the red team uses. Here, we're looking more at this at scale. So if we're using a tool like this from the red team perspective and they're hitting us in multiple different directions, the blue team's goal is to make sure that we can see all of that and then that we're actioning it, but we have to create a direction to action these things in an effective and volumetric manner. Um, and we have to start working on doing these tests and creating these kind of whitelists, blacklists for these types of events. Because if you're going to be hitting it with something that's AI and it's going to be doing a lot, it's going to be hitting new parts of your network. It's going to be creating new trajectories for the red team that maybe we haven't seen before, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it's not going to be noisy. It's not going to create alerts or alarms because that particular AI model is looking for whatever path it can. It's not looking for path of least resistance. It's looking for whatever it could do. So in that perspective, I can see what noise it's making and start learning what types of noise that we need to filter out to focus on during an event like that, and then start creating alerts and make it proactive as opposed to reactive.
So that's a very interesting take that I haven't actually heard before, Martin. And thank you for bringing that here. I mean, like, Aaron, like, as the dude who spends his life focused on adversary modeling and identifying those TTP and then, putting them into a context that can then drive our detections. What about Martin's model of signal to noise relative to the shape of vulnerability data sort of jumps out for you?
Yeah, for a lot of CFCs, and I know Martin can speak to this. One of the biggest problems that you're continually going to have is when people look at their attack surface and you start trying to figure out what is the most important thing to patch. Like everybody has to go through that Patch Tuesday stress all the time, where then it becomes okay, I have 10,000 vulnerabilities, right? One of the problems or one of the things I would say a benefit that we actually get from this should accelerate programs into getting in the right space that honestly you should have been in years ago, which is understanding how to prioritize patching to your business model. Specifically, when we look at something is we always look at it from an attacker perspective. When we come to a client, we are going to look at their external attack surface as if we are an attacker trying to get in, very much like what Jeremy's team does, but we do it from a threat intel perspective of this is what you need to get ahead of. Organizations can take this situation as a warning on looking at what are your critical systems that are exposed externally. Those need to now be matrixed into priority levels so you can get patching done quickly. That's also, to Martin's point, going to create an area where you have to have the most visibility on your external attack surface. You don't need to worry about the systems that are behind 3 different doors. Those are not the priority. Yes, they might be your crown jewels. We all understand that. But what's it going to take for an attacker to get there? How do you get to that first line of defense, that most vulnerable area? And once you start getting that perspective down, that's what helps you cut down that signal to noise ratio. You now know I see a lot of external scanning. We can start kind of clearing all of that stuff out when you're looking at that external surface. Then you can look at that next layer and say, I now kind of understand what an attack path would look like. Because an AI's attack path and a human's attack path, the biggest difference that we've seen when we've kind of watched these things happen, they take the same path, one's just faster. So if you build that kind of detection mechanism that Martin's talking about, you can just see how it would scale in. But the problem is getting clients to understand, where do you look first? Where's your actual priority? And that's the problem. Is we literally had people come forward and say, you need to patch every external vulnerability across the board today. And we saw VM teams come back and go, that is 10,000 vulnerabilities.
Yeah.
Which one do you want us to do first? And that's the problem. Nobody has that answer. We should have had that answer 5 years ago.
Oh yeah, 100%.
So, Jeremy, taking off your red hat and putting your blue hat on, if patching 10,000 external vulnerabilities is not going to happen in a day, and I think everybody who's both watching this and assembled here understands just how impossible that sounds and is. How would you tell someone, okay, in the next 30 days, this is the most important set of steps you can take based on what my team just told you?
In terms of, it would be understanding the risk of those vulnerabilities that are identified, right? So you have 10,000 vulnerabilities. Which ones are most likely to cause the greatest impact, right? Coming up with the risk register and prioritizing the remediation of those vulnerabilities. That's how I would approach it.
Got it. Martin, that track with you, or what would you be adding to that?
Yeah, it definitely tracks. That's the ultimate goal. Is to create that plan and be able to kind of initiate that. I think that what throws monkey wrenches into these plans is when you get 0 days, you get all
Right.
of the massive amounts of threat intel that companies tend to start hammering themselves with. And then you have
Mm-hmm.
some people running around with their hair on fire going, dear God, what are we going to do? We have all of this stuff. And it's like, let's focus and let's make sure that we're staying on key here, because regardless of everything going on, an attack chain stays an attack chain. No matter how fast the attack chain was created, it's still the
Mm-hmm.
attack chain. So as long as we're understanding what our data is doing, what our systems are doing, where we're at with our patching, and where we're at with vulnerabilities that we are known and or accepted, then we're in a good place to be proactive with this. And honestly, companies that have been doing that before the last 5 days are in a really good shape to kind of thwart this. Those starting now, you've got some work to do, but I think we could do it.
Yeah.
Understood. So, in being able to manage sort of the perception of security versus actual survivability, something that I just heard from y'all was being able to maintain focus, being able to maintain knowledge of where compensating controls are, and then being able to establish clear priorities even when machine speed is involved. Now, where do you think the gap widens fast enough for folks who aren't like, the folks that have been doing a pretty good job at the basics, Martin?
Ah, man. I mean, there's so many different areas that you could focus on there. Honestly, I think one of the harder things is for companies now where you've got a lot of different areas of the company that are adopting new things. They're constantly bringing in new technology. They're constantly bringing in, oh, hey, I just started using this new AI. It's called OpenClaw. You're like, oh God, please no. So as they're starting to kind of build these, you're starting to try and create this procedure, trying to create this path and keep yourself, focused on these things. One of the problems that you also need to have is you need to make sure that you're controlling your environment as far as what's being installed, what's being done, what's being generated, and where you're specifically like developers and engineers are storing data, building things out, and then keeping their API keys. These are some of the big things that I look at from my perspective. Is like, okay, this is the stuff that keeps me up at night. What is happening that we don't see, that all that shadow IT stuff is what's really going to put monkey wrenches into your system when you're trying to focus on all of this.
All tracks. And look, I love it when people, commit creds in a PR. That
I love it.
Yeah.
makes my day.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it was so
And
convenient.
where do you think the gap's widening? Oh man. Well, Eric, where do you, not Eric? Oh God, we're gonna fix that in post. Aaron, um, where do you think the gap is widening?
Well, I think a lot of it is, I mean, at the end of the day, businesses, organizations worldwide have a budgetary problem. Everyone over the last few years have been asked to do more with less.
Mm-hmm.
And at the same time, though, C-suites read these news articles and they come rushing over to a strained cyber fusion center or strained IT department. And they say, what are you going to do to protect me against this billions-dollar company developed cyber weapon that almost got unleashed on the world yesterday? Well, guys, you cut our funding over the last several years. Like, what exactly do you want me to do against the billions-dollar company's cyber weapon? That's the problem is, companies have to face the reality that you can't tell your entire workforce that you want to enable AI and you want to utilize AI, but then ignore the risks that are going to be inherent with onboarding that new technology. It's almost like not to be rude about it, but it's like every C-suite forgot what happened when we went to cloud. Every company said, let's go to cloud. Let's do it today. And then for the next 7 years, cyber defense companies that I worked for were doing great because your credentials were getting harvested on the dark web.
Mm-hmm.
your information was getting ransomed and you were getting extorted, and we constantly had new business. And it's like we didn't learn any lessons from that. Like, oh, we can't just enable technology overnight and have zero risk and not need to invest in our defense. That's the problem, is these are things that work hand in hand. You can absolutely accelerate with technology, but you have to accept the risk that is inherent in that.
Mhm.
And sometimes it feels an awful lot like everyone wants to ignore the risks. And then something bad like this happens and everyone scrambles and goes, well, what do we do? And we go, well, what do you have? What can you do? Because what the gap really is what are your capabilities right now? Do you have an attack surface management program that has enabled an actual risk matrix for you to utilize? Do you even know your external attack surface? Do you have shadow IT? What, like any of these types of things that, unfortunately, like I was saying, when everyone scaled down, one of the first things to go was vulnerability management,
Mhm.
because honestly, it was really difficult to explain to the guys cutting the budgets. What is it you do? Microsoft automatically patches. What do we need you for? And you saw vulnerability management teams get cut. Well, here we are now. Was that a good idea 2 years ago? No, it wasn't. And that's part of it. Is I really hope the AI revolution also becomes a revolution in the minds of C-suites, that you have to take your cyber defense budget seriously, because you can make $100 million mistake and think it was a good idea the entire time.
Yeah.
I know. I got on my soapbox. I'm sorry.
I mean, to be
all
fair,
great
I
points.
gave
All
you a
great points.
soapbox. I
Yeah.
gave you a soapbox. You chose to use it. And you know what? I'm actually grateful for it. I'm not even mad. However, like, you know, the thing that you brought up, the sort of vulnerability management teams drowning. Yes, they got funding cut. Yes, all of that stuff over the course of the last couple of years has been de-emphasized to literally the only, vestiges that are required to tick a compliance box somewhere.
Mhm.
Like, you got all of these folks drowning. Jeremy, how would you tell someone to use AI capabilities to go and drive a new picture on prioritization? Because we've
Just
talked
under,
about risk registers, we've talked
yeah.
about risk management, but like, can we turn this tool into an advantage for a vulnerability manager?
This tool in particular, maybe, but just AI in general, just understanding and correlating vulnerabilities, trying to identify and analyze them as they're coming through to kind of understand maybe how you can put, something in an attack chain together. Maybe it's understanding how prevalent it is in the environment, and maybe even incorporating those into, the current risk register to understand how the vulnerability would hit those sensitive systems in general.
Yeah. I mean, that definitely makes sense. I mean, when you do that, Martin, how would you tell somebody to operationalize that inside their Fusion Center?
That's a good question. I mean, it's we're treading on fairly
Sorry.
new ground. It's
Yeah.
not something that's historically there's a run book for this and we could just regurgitate this for
It's not.
all the clients. So it's one of those things where you have to really sit down. You have to understand your network. You have to understand where your teams are at and what your capabilities are as far as your tooling and what's happening, where your budget is, and then start working towards that. Because honestly, there's no one way to do this for every company. And I think that what Jeremy was saying is it's extremely important. But it's one of those things where everyone has to figure this out for themselves, and you need that expertise in the room with you when you're doing it, because otherwise it's the blind leading the blind.
Yeah, that's a good point.
So when you say expertise in the room, what is the expertise that you're going to want to prioritize? And then if you think about how you want to agentify, I just made up a word,
Yeah,
if you
you
were
did.
thinking, if you, I mean, if you were going to agentify that process, because there I said it twice, now it must be really real.
Definitely in there.
You're right.
What are you going to be putting into that puzzle? What are you going to put in there?
I mean, you need to have people who have experience in monitoring. You need to have people experienced with understanding how the tools integrate. Someone from networking, someone from the VM team, someone from and when I'm talking like, oh yeah, like we have Steve. He just started last week, but he's on the network team. We'll put him in, like someone who understands the network that they're currently in. um, Someone who understands the tools that they're currently available to the company, um, someone who understands the operation and how that flow works, and how that whole thing goes from we see it, we action it, we resolve it, we learn from it, and create that path for everybody with those people in mind.
And there's so many different nuances in there too, right? So you have the developers, right? So someone with the development knowledge in their processes, because all of that isn't documented and not everybody knows what that is. You have the folks that administer like things like legacy systems, ITOT, all of those other environments that may hit differently, right? So you have to have pretty much everyone you can involved in that process.
Well, what's interesting
Absolutely.
about that too is like if you think about it, where you could use an agent, where you can actually see a almost immediate benefit is all the collaboration that right now doesn't exist in organizations. Everything
Hmm.
that both of you just talked about was who knows who does this over here and who handles that over there. That's
Right.
actually where AI could be a huge uplift almost immediately, is something just as simple as why don't you just load in and agentify basically your workflows into what we would call the CFC model. But the CFC model is actually somewhat difficult to manage and maintain because you have the stand-ups and you have the communication. We
Hmm.
used to tailor this basically. We would write the workflows and the playbooks. You can turn a lot of that into an agent. And honestly, if you just got representatives from your network team, your IT team, your cyber defense team, if you had the leaders from all of that sit down and just write out what they do, who they communicate with, and what their daily duties are, put that into an agent, you almost just created an agent that could help those teams collaborate
Just map it
better
out.
and talk about it, because that is actually one of the big missing pieces is your teams naturally probably do not talk all day every day. For example, does your attack surface reduction or vulnerability management team understand what the network team is standing up next week? Do they really know what's going on? Would they be able to prepare for it better if they did? People are moving in separate silos all the time. So start breaking the silos down just using something as simple as AI collaboration.
So let me add a different wrinkle onto that, Aaron. Um, you know, one of the things that's happening as more people build applications, I mean, heck, you've seen, the raft of folks inside our company that are fully empowered to go and build and like, look, we're using those to run our business processes. Is there a moment where this is sort of the redo of the shift left movement? Like, except now we're bringing the whole of the security apparatus along and not just an AppSec team?
I mean, yeah, like at that's the biggest part is there's not a single area that's kind of it, right? Is there's not a single area where AI doesn't exist. Your finance department is using artificial intelligence. I don't even know. There's not mail rooms anymore, but let's pretend there was mail rooms. If there were mail rooms, they would be using AI. The fact of the matter is every aspect of your business is going to have something tailored in there. So yes, it is going to be the entirety. It's not just at your there's it's not right to just say there now needs to be an AI security team like there was an AppSec team, right? Or an application penetration test. There's no such thing as the AI penetration test. There needs to be penetration tests that are built in the age of AI. This is a qualitative leap across the entirety of information technology. This, like I said, this is the same thing as when everything moved to cloud. It's the same thing as when we centralized between IT and OT. These types of big changes that have happened across the entire landscape, we have to look at it from a holistic perspective. You can't just solve this. If there's a company out there that's selling AI security, you're going to fall on your face. There's no way that it will be complete. They're just going to tell you what agents are on your network and which ones you should be concerned about. That's not the same thing as protecting your entire organization from AI threats, AI misuse, and AI speed. I hope that answered the question.
I feel like it both answered the question and I gave you another opportunity to stand on a soapbox.
I can't help it.
So I'll throw this one out. This is a dealer's choice one / anybody can jump in here. Like, what's the number one anti-pattern that Mythos has created in either a defender or an offensive security professional's mind? Like, pick the number one anti-pattern that you guys have been seeing.
I mean,
Boo.
Are you laughing just because I said anti-pattern?
no.
Okay, fine.
I'm trying to think of how to not actually be
Flip.
okay. I'll give one. I'm trying not to go on a soapbox again, but I'll do it. The biggest thing that I've realized is everybody reset.
Okay.
We had multiple instances of clients coming up and just hair on fire. It didn't matter how mature a team was. It was hair on fire. It was patch everything. It was, I need to know what's our entire internal attack surface look like? What is this? What is that? It was like, guys, stop. We have policies. At the same time, by the way, this was not publicly available.
Still isn't. I mean, like,
this was discovered.
Yeah.
They stood up Glasswing. What are you asking? Because, people come to me, Intel, what are we doing about this? Trying to join Glasswing, I guess. What do you want me to do about this? Like, we're still not even sure, to be fair. We're not even sure this isn't a marketing gimmick by Anthropic. And you're asking my Intel team to spend resources on investigating what?
I feel like, probably not marketing on their part. I mean, otherwise we wouldn't have all the crypto hashes. Like, congratulations. Like, a whole pile of SHA-3s don't add up to April Fools. But I'll plus one you on the fact that I talked to a wide variety of security executives during RSA in the not too distant past. And yes, before this moment, but people were already scared.
Mm-hmm.
Like, and I'm talking about like career pros. Like, these are folks who they don't get freaked out. And there is a prevailing feeling of freak out right now. And I, if there was one thing I personally would love is for conversations like these to help bring the temperature level down for folks, because while yes, it's true, like, congratulations, we need machine speed for defenders as well. And we need machine speed doing that attack surface, both internal and external assessment, in order to build the picture from which we prioritize. But what we're sort of all talking around, and maybe Aaron a little more because he's got a soapbox, but it winds up being about turning the actions into machine speed execution instead of it being humans directing machines to take action. So literally inverting the model. And I suppose the question that comes to mind here is like, do we even have red teams and blue teams anymore in, say, 48 to 60 months? Or is it just one team taking both offensive and defensive actions because machines have allowed for us to no longer specialize, but also to develop more expert level knowledge in humans? Like, do we have two teams anymore inside of 5 years, guys?
I think I think if you don't mind me jumping in on this one, um,
Jump.
this is one of those questions that I think it's one of the ones I feel on a pretty often basis, and not even just around this particular incident with Mythos and all this stuff, but in general with AI and with any other new thing like supercomputers. Are supercomputers going to kill us, and are we ever going to be able to recuperate from that? And it's always just one thing or another. And when I'm sitting down in a meeting with executives who are trying to understand, okay, what are our team's capabilities? If we have a red team and a blue team, how do we put them together and create this cohesive team? When we're talking about, if you're asking in 48 months, do I think we'll still have two teams? I think we absolutely will. And the reason I think that is because,
Okay.
first off, on the blue team side of the house, you have people who totally and wholeheartedly understand exactly how these tools function from a defensive mechanism, how and what they're searching for, how and what they're trying to hunt, and how they write custom rules around what we're seeing. On the other side, we've got the red team who know exactly how the external parts of these networks function, how they're supposed to be designed, and how they can exploit things that are not done correctly. The middle part, I think, is where the two teams are going to come together. Once they're in, they're traversing. How do they understand that part of the network? How do they map that network? How do they understand where to move? The blue team's watching that part. That's where that cross mogenation needs to exist in those teams. When we're talking about something like Mythos coming in and saying, "Hey, look, what are we supposed to do about this? This is terrifying." I'm looking at it from our perspective of this isn't doing anything that we aren't already prepared for. This is someone, let's call his name Mythos, this red teamer named Mythos, who's sitting here, has figured out a way to get in. Cool. He figured out a way to get in. From my perspective, from a defensive perspective, it's never been if you're going to get breached, it's when. And how you react to that and how you understand what your network is doing and what your tools are capable of and how to alert on that and exactly how to function once you find that is where we're going to have to focus and create that AI speed, that machine speed to counter that capability. So as fast as they're being able to get in, we should be able to create something that's as fast to detect it and run our playbook and understand how we function and where our tools sit in order to block that. And that's where the two teams coming together are going to be beneficial.
One big fat purple team.
One big fat purple team that function to create a tool that can watch and see and understand exactly what that dichotomy looks like, that attack chain from start to finish.
Right on. Cool. Big fat, my big fat purple team. No, not my big fat Greek wedding. How does your big fat purple team feel, Aaron? Is that gonna land for you?
I don't know if that's an appropriate question for a work call. No, I think it's right. It's one of those situations where, at the time, our current policies and procedures, they are like the stuff is already written. The rules of how to engage have already been written, and there's nothing I'm seeing that suggests that those rules of the road should be broken. It's merely how do we refine them and how do we get them to move quicker and how do we get them to move at, as we keep saying, machine speed? How do you put a human in the loop but utilize AI to speed up your defensive posture? To the fear point of it and what makes everyone so afraid, Probably the best statement I heard came from our vice president of global cybersecurity, Ed Serafin, where he says the biggest thing that scares everyone about AI is no one knows what it is. When he talks about this, he'll say, you don't understand AI. So first, let me explain what artificial intelligence actually is. And that helps the conversation on getting to how do you defend against it. Because it is, to be fair, for a lot of people, kind of just a mystery. Most people's engagement, even in professional organizations with an AI model, is a chatbot. And then suddenly we're telling everybody, hey, that chatbot over there can daisy chain 12-year-old vulnerabilities and take all of your data and run away. That's horrifying because nobody would have ever thought, how is this even possible? Like, I can barely get Copilot to make a document the proper way that I want it to without yelling at it 1,000 times. And that's exactly it. No one's really sure exactly how these work. So to Martin's point, we don't need to remake the wheel when it comes to cyber defense. We just have to move faster and cleaner and make sure that we're doing it properly.
So, if there was one thing that you would tell somebody to start measuring next week about their cyber program, we have to move faster. What would you be telling them to measure as a strong signal that they're moving faster?
I would want them to quantify what their biggest threat is. Yeah.
Yeah.
What's your biggest threat? Like, quantify it. Don't just tell me what you think it is. Show me in the numbers. What's your biggest threat? And like Martin just said, detection. What are you detecting right now?
If your speed to detect is hours, then you're already losing this battle. Your speed to detection should be focused on, like Aaron's saying, your biggest threats moving down. How quickly can you detect your biggest threat? What is your biggest threat? Your biggest threat, if you ask most CISOs or most executive levels, they're going to say someone getting in and stealing our data or exfiltrating our data, and that's a massive. Cool. All right. Well, here's the thing: when someone gets into your network, they're moving around, they're doing things, and they're stealing your data. There's a lot of things they're doing, and I've spent a lot of time watching and doing, you know, forensics on the aftermath of this happening to multiple different environments. And there are certain things that happen. There are connections that are made. There's network that leaves. There's data on a massive scale that leaves your network. There is, credentials being used. There's new credentials being created. There's a lot of these tactics and techniques, procedures that are being done, and you have to watch them. So the time to detect these things are what's going to help you. No matter how fast it's detected from external and it's exploited, your time to detect should be almost immediate as soon as they start to try and exploit that. And there's no reason it shouldn't be. If you're doing what you're supposed to do, if you're focusing in the right areas, you're focusing your team on how to develop this better, how to create better run books, how to create better knowledge base within the team on how to react when they're seeing things, what is good, what is known bad, and doing this, then your time to detect and knowing what your biggest threat is where you're going to win.
All right, Jeremy, you're up. What do you think?
Quantify. I mean, these two gentlemen said a lot of what I was going to say.
I know they said a lot. Are you just going to hit the
Man.
+1 button, or do you have
I'm
something
just gonna
else?
plus one it. It's all very good stuff. Maybe adding in, maybe it's vulnerability remediation time and things like that. When you're getting those tests and those issues are identified. How quickly are you remediating those? And not just how quickly, but how many systems are getting those and what are the delta, right? How many can you not remediate because that's going to pose an additional risk?
Got it. All right. So bringing this to a close, for defenders who watch this panel and have exactly 1 hour tomorrow morning to do something concrete and different, what are you going to tell them to do, Jeremy?
turn off their computers.
Okay, I like the ostrich defense is
It
reasonable.
works for me, right?
All right. Aaron, what are you going to tell them to do?
Quantify your most external risk.
Right on. Martin, what do you got?
1 hour. What are you going to do?
Yep.
That's a tough call from my perspective. I think one thing that I would say is understand what's known good. Spend an hour understanding what's known good in your environment. If you know what's known good, you know what isn't. Spend your time focusing on what's known good, and that will drastically improve your ability to detect.
Right
I guess
on.
my real short statement, instead of turning off a computer, would just be calm down and prioritize. Right?
Yeah.
Everything's okay.
I agree. Calm down, prioritize. You can use these tools to your advantage. We talked about
Mhm.
lots of different ways that can happen. And get back to doing a good job. Just do it faster with
Yeah.
machines. Right on. Gentlemen, I thank you so much for joining me here and the lively chat, the trips onto soapboxes, the, head stuffing in sand, me screwing up a name. We're human, we're here, and we're just trying to make this world a bit safer for everybody. So thank you again for your time. And hey, folks, if you like this, give us some feedback. You can find us all on LinkedIn, either at the DeepSeas page, or you can reach out to us individually. Have a great rest of your day, and thanks for watching.